Well, hello everyone. How are you today? Episode number 22. I am Michèle Kline with Kline Hospitality, and I'm here with my co-hostess, Stephanie Ledger from First Rate Hospitality. How are you, Stephanie, today?
Very well. How are you, Michèle?
I'm fantastic. We have a fun topic today. We are going to talk about never burning your bridges.
Yes, absolutely. And the importance of it as
The
well.
importance of it. So, I will do a quick intro because we are all here in the hospitality and travel industry. Why is never burning your bridges so important to us, especially in our industry? And that is because this is a big world and we all know each other because it's a small industry. Even though it seems like it's gigantic, you will always find that one person on the other side of the table at any time. So,
Absolutely.
Stephanie, is there any particular WTF type of moment or story you can share with us today that has to do with learning the lesson of not burning your bridges?
Absolutely. And then we also have to have our lovely picture here. And this I think this also too goes with my story with, me being here on the East Coast and you being on the West Coast and making sure that we're never burning that bridge in the middle, like you had said, because you never know who would be on that other side. But for my story is where here I am working on a project, and unfortunately, one of the leaders needed to be let go. And more about because of it was a changing of leader management that was coming into the property. So it was nothing on performance. It was just business that needed to be done for the hotel. And then here we are 3 years later. I'm going on to another project, and guess who the director of operations is?
Of
So,
course.
a little bit awkward at first, but when we were going through the situation years ago of, like I said, it was just business that needed to be conducted through the hotel. It was nothing on performance. But now here entering into the property on another project and then being right across the table from them again. But at the same time, because we were professional and we were able to handle what needed to be done in the previous, now here we are able to move forward and getting the next project to be able to be done for her property and her clients. So crazy,
So
never
that's
know.
fantastic. You see how the cards change, right? And when I think of never burning bridges, to me is a similar story or a series of similar stories. I am going to speak to it in a generalized way because I cannot tell you, Stephanie, and audience, the amount of times I have been in situations where the people that were on the other side were either being like terrible leaders and they were just coming into my operation. For example, I always run a very tight ship and, pretending like I'm here to save the world and I know it all and I know this person and the other and this and that, and like acting totally crappy. And at the end of the day, ended up not making it through the first 90 days, and then eventually receiving an email from that person saying, oh look, I'm still in the market and I'm looking for a job, and me thinking to myself, well, guess what, you did kind of burn this bridge right here, so I don't know how I'll be able to recommend you to anyone because your behavior while you were in touch with me was just terrifying, right? Or situations like the one you were referring to where you have a specific team member who's not cutting it or who's not doing a great job, and then all of a sudden you end up applying progressive discipline to the point that they're out, and maybe they don't report to you directly, but you know the whole story, right? Because you are at the end of the day the one signing on the approval of the termination or whatnot. And then you get this email or this LinkedIn DM saying, I was hoping you could recommend me for such and such place. I want to use you as a reference. I've already applied. And you're thinking, like, you've got to be kidding me, right? Like, you literally went through a 90-day progressive discipline, trying to get you closer, to the operation that you were to the door, and you literally decided to push yourself through that door. And now you're asking for a recommendation.
Yeah.
So those are many situations and many WTF type of stories that I can share, but obviously I'm not going to mention any names. So in a general way, that's kind of what I see. So what would you say, Stephanie, are some things that perhaps we should be recommending those in the audience when it comes to really understanding that our industry is not as big as you think it is, and
Oh,
people
yeah.
move from property to property? So act like you would at all times and stop being a jerk.
WTF.
You know?
Yes. And then also, too, it's just even because in our industry, people move around from property to property or from brand to brand, that you never know when all of a sudden a line employee or a leader is applying for a position, and you come across their resume and you look at their previous property and see, oh, they worked at such and such in such and such city. And I happen to know someone from back in my day that came from that property. Let me just give them a call, or let me shoot them a text message, catching up with them and seeing what their feedback is. And little does the person know that is applying that there's also, too, this kind of background check that is going on really doing their own reference checking, because they just so happen to know someone that worked at the same property that you previously did.
So that's a very valid point, Stephanie. And here's the thing: the candidate will probably be banking on the fact that you're not supposed to be asking for a reference unless there's an authorization in place, or so on and so forth. But the reality is that everyone knows each other in this industry. And I don't know if there are other industries out there where everyone knows each other the same way we do. And there is so much dynamic and so much movement from leaders from property to property. And people just don't get it.
Yeah.
It's incredible. How can you shoot yourself on the foot and, I don't want to say end your career, but put a dent in your career just because you're not thinking bigger picture?
Absolutely.
So I would say for all of the leaders out there, think big picture. How can you continue to build on those relationships that you already have under your umbrella? And then at the same time, how can you take it down a notch when you have to behave in a certain way? Because at the end of the day, you never know who's going to be at the other side of the table.
Exactly. And it starts getting into an HR point of, like you said, with asking for references, or when you do speak to a property and the property is, only able to saying, oh, they worked from this state to this state. And that's pretty much it. They can't really go into details. But, there's a lot of reading in between the lines when you're now having to say, yes, they only worked from this state to this state, and not adding anything else. Meanwhile, you may have an amazing employee, and then they're going to say, yes, they worked from this state to this state. If you need anything else, such and such, of, giving the feedback. And so there's a lot of reading in between the lines to saying, okay, they were, a great employee that they would hire back again, and knowing that, okay, they would make a great player on our team. Without, there's tense moments that you get in between your coworkers, in between your leaders. And those are the moments of how you handle it could burn you in the butt down the road. And you may think about, oh, you know what, I'm out of hospitality. Look at, even in our industry right now, so many people are moving into different industries from the hospitality industry and saying, yep, who cares? I'm gonna light the fire, whatever. And then now they go to their next position or their next industry, and oh, look at, there's probably someone else there, some kind of other connection, being like, oh yeah, did you hear how they went out? But yeah,
Yes, and how, here's the thing too, like for the person on the other side, right? When you have someone who's reaching out to you asking for those references, the leader who's a great leader is going to have a good behavior regardless, right? At all times, even if you're absolutely hating your job, you're going to do whatever it takes for you to properly leave that place, that workplace, so that there is nothing associated with your name that has a negative connotation. But then on the other hand, how many times have you received that email asking for someone's reference? And if you can't say something positive right off the bat, my recommendation is always to invite the person who's asking for the reference to get with you on the phone.
yes.
Even if it's a 5-minute phone call, because here's the thing, there's a lot of things that may have happened during that experience with that potential candidate, right? It could have been that they were not in a good situation when it comes to their personal life. There was an uncomfortable environment. It was a toxic environment at work. There were not the right tools to get the job done, or the right budget in place, or whatever the case may be. There's a lot of factors that could potentially be playing against that candidate that you're asking for references about, that should be discussed a little further, as opposed to saying, yeah, my experience wasn't great. But
Yeah.
why, right? So I think that it's also noble for the person who is receiving the request to invite that other person to get on a phone call for 5 minutes to truly walk them through it, because at the end of the day, it is someone's livelihood or employment that is in your hands when you give or do not give that recommendation.
Absolutely. And also too, you know, a lot of these scenarios we're saying is, you know, typically within 2 to 3 years, you know, when you may be like reconnecting with them, but there's times too where it could have been 10, 15 years. And, you know, like for us starting our career very young, and so much has, you know, evolved and changed to where we are now. So, you know, maybe I was that young person in college that, you know, may have called off a little more than what I should have. But at the same time, now 15, 20 years later, you know, I'm not that person as it was. I, you know, matured. But then being able to knowing, okay, this person that could give me a great reference because of I know who they know in the property, and having, like how you said, having that conversation, and just instead of just blowing them off, because you never know now where they will end up and when you may need their reference as well, or connection.
Absolutely. And this applies to vendors.
Yes.
So and on both sides, if you are the vendor or if you are the property, and vice versa, because again, it's such a small industry and you're cross referencing your skill sets. So at the end of the day, you may have had someone who used to be your vendor that is now going to be the purchasing manager or the one making that decision, or the other way around, or you have um, a property manager who's now working for a specific vendor, and you find yourself in the opposite role, so you're the decision maker at this point. So not burning your bridges and paying attention to building those genuine relationships and genuine connections and behaving the proper way at all times is crucial, regardless of whatever segment of the industry that you are in.
Absolutely. Or even too, you know, just also when you're like in a bind, And here you are getting ready for a crazy weekend or unpredicted weekend that may have occurred. And you now need your laundry to be delivered faster for your linen, to making sure that you're able to turn the house, so you're not having so many rooms waiting on queue. And then here you are with having that relationship with your laundry department that's outsourced, and then being able to call them and saying, hey, I really could use the assistance right now, any way that we could be able to get a delivery. And having that relationship too is good, instead of just being like, oh yeah, they're the laundry company that does whatever and delivers whenever. But really having that relationship with your vendors too, to help you out in those binds and not burning that bridge, because you never know when you're going to need them to come through for you.
You never know. Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. So don't burn those bridges. So, Stephanie, any other remarks for today?
Nope. Just making sure. Look at us. Look at how we've, met each other at different periods in our career, and and we've had definitely some projects that were some highs and some lows, but we got through them, and it's great. If now here we are today, hosting a
Absolutely. So,
podcast.
why don't we share a little bit of that story?
Yes.
So, I'll take a deep dive on this one. So, basically, Stephanie and I met while I was in a role of regional vice president, and Stephanie was coming into the organization to create a new audit program. So, in the process, I was able to work with her. I was part of the committee that was creating this audit program. But once the program is created, it's launch time. Stephanie kicks it off in various other areas in the country, and all of a sudden, it's time for my region to be audited. And I've already had that opportunity to meet with Stephanie and to work with Stephanie on this project. So we had built some sort of rapport at that point.
Yep.
But obviously, there's always something that can be improved in any of the properties. And I did have some of my leaders in charge at those particular properties that weren't so excited about the results that they may have received from Stephanie while she was there visiting. But I still think that we were both in the right headspace to make sure that we didn't burn those bridges. I feel like it's like a tongue twister, whatever, twister, language barrier, disclaimer. Anyway, so what about you on your side? What did this look like to you on your side?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you had mentioned, is you're here trying to stay true to yourself, but then also to supporting your team. And so here you are, understanding that yes, these were the things that were missed. But then also too not saying no, it's this way, my way or the highway. We were able to have conversations, and then being able to work through them based upon the audits and the next steps of what training would look like. And I see that a lot too with even clients nowadays, of being there and saying, yes, this is what's happened, and this is what you've missed, and this is what you did well on. And then some leaders come and say, no, 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 that's not right, you didn't see that. And I'm like, no, this is what happened. And just making sure that you're going to be put into those difficult situations and having those conversations, but at the end of the day, that I know that I can stay true to myself, and also to be able to speak at a level without raising my voice, unless it needs to be appropriately raised. But making sure that we're adults. We are adults that are in business, and just at the end of the day, making sure that we're making that paycheck.
So, in other words, don't hold a grudge because Stephanie pointed you on one thing or another. Anyway. So thank you everyone for listening or for viewing, being here today with us. Remember, take this with you. Don't burn your bridges.
Yeah.
Just don't do it. Everybody knows each other. It's a bad idea, bad business.
Wonderful. Well, until next time.
Bye, everyone.